Hello, everybody, and welcome back to MSB Weekly, a special edition. Today, we'll be previewing the wild card game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Tennessee Titans. Ben Strober will be the man previewing the game for you all. And then at the end, I'll come back and do our game predictions. Ben, game preview, takes through it.
All right, so obviously this is a rematch of last year's playoff game where the Ravens were defeated by the Tennessee Titans 28-12. Lamar Jackson threw two costly interceptions on 31 to 59, passing with 365 yards and 143 yards rushing. And Tannehill, in a game where he only threw 14 passes and completed 7 of 88. This was just a game where the Ravens were dominated by Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry was an absolute force out there. He had 30 carries for 195 yards and even threw a touchdown. That's why going into the preview for this game, the keys for the Ravens to this game is obviously just going to be containing Derrick Henry. He's had another dominant season. He ran for over 2,000 yards once again on 17 touchdowns. Another threat that the Titans have that the Ravens will need to worry about is obviously leading receiver A.J. Brown, who had 1,075 yards and 11 touchdowns this season. So it's going to be really important for the Ravens defense to step up this year. And I think they really need to force Tannehill to make a lot of throws. I mean, take Brown out of the conversation, and that leaves the Titans with less weapons on the offensive side. And you got to get Henry out of the conversation. I mean, do whatever it takes to get him from not rushing for 200 yards. Because if you give up 200 yards, you're in for a long day. Now, also, I think Lamar Jackson obviously is 0-2 in the playoffs to start his career. And, this is a very important game for him. He wants to prove to everyone that he's not just a regular season quarterback and he's not just a running back. And this game right here, this is really Lamar's chance for him to prove, that he's the real deal. I mean, obviously, Lamar's had another really great season. He rushed for over 1,000 yards once again, which is just astonishing for a quarterback. Threw for 2,757 yards. And, so basically, Lamar's going to look to have a really big game. I mean, his weapons this year have obviously been limited to Marquise Brown has been his number one receiver this year. Despite having a few rough games, he does have 8 touchdowns and 58 receptions. And Lamar has thrown for 26 touchdowns, but only 9 interceptions. But it's going to be very important for Lamar to, use his legs and make a lot of plays because a lot of games where Lamar has been forced to make a lot of throws from the pocket, games have not gone too well for the Ravens so far. Lamar last year had a Pro Football Focus grade of 90.1, which was in his MVP season, which is very high. In this grade, he was dropped all the way down to 74.9 just 1 year later. And the reason for this is because I think teams have been trying, their absolute hardest to take Lamar's legs out of the conversation because as everyone knows, when Lamar gets upfield and starts running, he's a dangerous player. He can make a lot of plays. The Ravens were number 1 in the NFL for rushing yards this season, but last in the NFL in passing yards, which is crazy because they've put up some tremendous offensive performances this year. Obviously week 1, they blew out the Browns. And then the next week they put up 33 against the Texans, had a rough game against the Chiefs, but obviously, the Chiefs were undefeated at the time, and that Mahomes is really hard to stop for that defense. Obviously beat Washington, put up a lot of points on the Bengals. And overall, the Ravens were having a mixed year at the time. They were 6-5 after taking that loss to the Steelers, where, basically they had no one playing. It was basically their practice squad out there due to COVID concerns and all, so many people testing positive. But since then, the Ravens really put it together. They got 5 straight wins in a row, absolutely dominating the last few games to get themselves in the playoffs. So I think the Ravens are hot, and they could be very dangerous. Pending Lamar Jackson has a great game and can change his narrative passing. I think they have a very good shot at winning. And as long as they can contain Derrick Henry and not let him run all over them, I think they easily have a great chance to win this game. Now I'm going to go into the Titans here. So the Titans, Tannehill has had a very good season for them with a QBR of 79.5, throwing 33 touchdowns and 3,819 yards passing. That's, he's arguably, he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So Tannehill can be very dangerous. And obviously his leading target is A.J. Brown, who had 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. So they're a very tough duo to stop, and it's going to be very important for the Ravens secondary and the Ravens pass rush, especially led by Patrick Queen and Ngakoue. Those guys are going to really need to put pressure on Tannehill this week in order to have a chance. Some other leading things for the Titans is the Titans secondary has been led by Malcolm Butler, who's the leading defensive player for them with 4 interceptions and 100 tackles. And for the Titans defense, they're really going to expect a big game out of Harold Landry III, who's their leading sack guy with 5.5. You mean they're going to need to put a lot of pressure on Lamar to avoid him from getting out of the pocket and running. I think that's going to be the biggest key for them. So the Titans also finished 11-5 this year, and I'd say their season was pretty balanced. The only bad loss I can really remember them taking was they just had a rough game against the Bengals. It was just one of those games where they just had a bad game. And they took a loss to Steelers, who were undefeated at the time, and they were down 27-7 in the third quarter, and then they ended up, losing at the end of the game by 1 score. So I think this team clearly has a lot of fight in them. And as we could see last week, they won the division in a crazy game over the Texans. They got the game-winning field goal off the upright and in by Sam Sloman, who they just had to bring in because they were having kicker issues most of the year. And that game was crazy. Their defense looked very shaky in that game, as Deshaun Watson was playing, but Watson is a great quarterback given the season they had. Watson was really able to put up great numbers this year, regardless of the record showing. So you could cut them a little bit of slack there, but I think the Titans' weakest point probably is their defense. I think their defense is a little suspect at times, and it's going to be very important for the defense to have a good game if they want to have a chance to win today and just containing Lamar. So now that we've got things previewed, let's get into a prediction of this game.
Awesome, and going to talk a bit about what you said too. Is these Titans are a really good team, and the one thing that the Ravens cannot do is just focus on Derrick Henry. Last time when these teams played earlier in the season, Henry only averaged 4.8 yards per carry, which against Derrick Henry is not too bad. But Corey Davis had over 100 yards. A.J. Brown had 62, and they cannot allow any big plays. That's going to be a big thing. Corey Davis has been one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. He's going to be a huge stop. So I think, as Ben said, now we're going to get into predictions.
One more thing, actually. I forgot to mention another really important factor for this game is obviously the Ravens, leading running back right now. J.K. Dobbins has been the leading guy, especially in this 5-game winning streak they've had. This season he's got 9 touchdowns. I think it's going to be really important for Dobbins to have a big game to kind of take the pressure off Lamar. Establishing a strong run game is going to really, ease off Lamar, open up the passing game for him and just overall make it an easier game.
Yeah, that'll be huge. So I think that now game previews. So I personally think that Derrick Henry. I think that my final score, I think I have Titans 34, Ravens 31. And that's just I have something against running quarterbacks in the playoffs. A running quarterback has never won a Super Bowl. You can say there's always times for first, and there always is, but a running quarterback has never won a Super Bowl. Think about it. Russell Wilson lost in the Super Bowl. Kaepernick lost in the Super Bowl against the Ravens. Cam Newton lost in the Super Bowl. And just I don't have the confidence for a running quarterback in the playoffs to be able to do it. And Derrick Henry is just such a beast. I don't know how the Ravens are going to stop him. And I think that's the big thing. But, it's just there's so much firepower. Ryan Tannehill is having a great season. Derrick Henry is the best running back in the NFL. He is one of the only running backs that I think is completely irreplaceable. They now have 2 top receivers, Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. Corey Davis is going to be a free agent next year. This could be a bit of a tryout if the Ravens want to go after him. But yeah, I don't see a way that the Ravens can keep up. It was so close last time, went into overtime, and I think it'll be the exact same back and forth. So like I said, 34-31 Titans is my prediction. Ben, what about you?
I'm going to go against you on this one, Adam. I think that Lamar is going to change his playoff narrative here. I think he's going to stop this whole thing about, him, only being a regular season running guy. I think Lamar is going to have a good game. I think Henry's also going to have a very good game, but I think this game will be a shootout. I'm going to take the Ravens at 38 over the Titans 34. And I just think really it's going to come down to one of the final possessions of the game with possibly a Ravens game-winning score. But I think nevertheless it's going to be a great game. And I think the Ravens are going to come on top and get their revenge in this one.
Yeah, it's just if we remember the last game, Lamar Jackson threw the ball 60 times. If he throws the ball anywhere close to 60 times next week, they're going to lose the game. They only gave the ball to Mark Ingram 6 times last year. They're not going to be able to play the same way that they did last time. They're going to have to change things up from when they played the Titans the first time because they lost. It's going to be a really interesting game. It should be the game of the week now that the Browns are dealing with all their COVID stuff. I think it's the game of the week. You could argue Bills, Colts, but I really think that this is the game of the week. This is the game that we should all be watching for, and it's going to be a really good one. I'm really excited to watch this on Sunday. Sunday, 1 o'clock on ABC, and I think ABC, ESPN, it says both, but I don't know. Would it be on ABC or ESPN? But yeah, it's 1 o'clock game in Tennessee. It's unfortunate for the Ravens that the Steelers were as good as they were, and they're going to have to play an away playoff game. But you know what? There's not full crowds, not full fans. Tennessee does have some fans. Maybe that'll play into effect. Maybe that's something to look out for. But I don't see a way Baltimore's going to win. Yes, they're on fire the past couple weeks, but they also just have not been playing the best teams. I mean, they've gone Cowboys, who are a good team, or who are not a good team, sorry. Then the Browns, who are good, and then they went Jaguars, Giants, Bengals to finish off the season. I mean, I don't know how you come off of that stretch and then go against a team like the Titans and go and win, but we'll see. I think it'll be a really close game, a really good one. Ben, do you have any more final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say the Ravens' schedule has been easier towards the end of the season, obviously, which led to them, getting a wild card spot in the playoffs. But I think I saw something in that Browns game, which was a little different. I mean, that Ravens offense can be very explosive. I mean, especially if Marquise Brown, doesn't have drop issues and can get open, because obviously the Ravens are limited at weapons. I mean, maybe you'd like to see Mark Andrews getting involved for them. He can be somewhat of a decent weapon for them. So they'd probably like to get him involved more. But when the Ravens offense gets going, I mean, they put up 45 points against that Browns team who, to be honest, I mean, they're not a very good defensive team, but nevertheless, it was a very good performance by Lamar, especially coming in on 4th and 5 for the game-winning score after his cramps or, whatever was going on there.
Yeah, well, we'll see what they do. The game is tomorrow. Of course, this coming out on Saturday. You guys watching this on Saturday. Huge game. Make sure to check out the website, MarylandSportsBlog.com. That's got all the written previews, everything, all the storylines leading into this game. The recaps will be on there. We will probably come out with an MSB Weekly after the game, which will recap the Washington football game and the Ravens one. I cannot give it definite 100%, but most likely look out for that. Make sure to follow along on Twitter at Maryland Sports Blog and the DC side of Maryland Sports for all of our stuff. The Caps start next week. That's the biggest news. We'll, of course, talk about that, like I said. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Ben, thank you for joining me. We will see you guys soon.